This is Corolla Digital.
This is We the People. What is wrong with our country? I don't want to believe what you believe, and you can't make. I want to hear why it's bad to feel good. These two political gangs don't have your best interest in mind. Makes me proud to be an American. Makes me even smarter to be off the grid. Stay vigilant, people. Abraham, light up that joint. My vigilant listeners, we're finishing up our Uncover 9/11 week on We the People with Jesse Ventura. Today we welcome a guest who offers a different and controversial take on the greatest tragedy to hit American soil, Richard Gage, the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, joins me for a discussion you don't want to miss. But first, let's go to Alex Logan in the command center with the latest headlines. Alex?
Well, Governor, it looks like Citizens United is here to stay. Vox reports that last Thursday, a proposal to amend the U.S. Constitution to allow tougher campaign finance and election spending restrictions was blocked in the Senate in a party line vote. 54 Democrats voted to advance the measure, but every single Republican voted against it. Texas Senator Ted Cruz summed up the Republicans' opposition to the bill when he stated that supporters were trying to, quote, repeal the free speech provisions of the First Amendment. Armed with posters with pictures of Tina Fey, Will Ferrell, and Dana Carvey, Cruz argued that Saturday Night Live creator Lorne Michaels could be put in jail under this amendment for making fun of any politician. That is extraordinary, it is breathtaking, and it is dangerous. He also did a, quote, not awful impression of Dana Carvey's George H.W. Bush impression to punctuate his point. Your thoughts, Governor?
Well, I'll tell you what. This just shows me that Cruz and all the rest of the Republicans are bought and sold, that they clearly want corporations to participate in our system. They feel corporations are as valuable as people are, and that's who forks out the money that they get so that they can all retire with their millions and all this when they're done. To me, it's disgraceful that this proposal fell along party lines, but it shows me that the Republicans like corporations better than people. So all you people out there that vote Republican, remember, the Republicans will put a corporation ahead of you. They feel a corporation is more valuable than you. I can't wait for Ted Cruz to allow corporations to vote. Why the heck? Why not go to that level? If they have the same right as a citizen, then a corporation should be allowed to vote too. And then on the flip side, they should also pay the same taxes that citizens pay. Let's see if that happens also. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, in other voting news, House Republicans have struck down an amendment to widen benefits for gay veterans. Nevada Representative Dinah Titus proposed the amendment that would require the Department of Veterans Affairs to extend benefits in same-sex marriages nationwide, not just in states where the unions are legally recognized. As Representative Titus put it, quote, our veterans did not fight for a state, they fought for the United States. But the amendment was struck down in a 12-3 vote after committee chairman Representative Jeff Miller of Florida came out against the amendment. So do our vets deserve the same benefits in every state, Governor?
You'd think they should. A veteran's a veteran, and I agree with what the person said. They serve the United States of America, unless, of course, they're with the National Guard of one particular state. Then, of course, they basically serve that state. But as you see, the National Guard gets called up all the time into the national conflict, so they're even serving the United States of America. I think it's disgraceful. What they're saying, in essence, is that personally, if a gay soldier gets killed or something that happens to a soldier who defends this country and they're gay, that they don't have the same value as a hetero. That's what they're stating to you here. That a hetero soldier is thought more highly of than a gay soldier. It's pathetic. When they serve their country, they're doing the same thing. When they get shot and killed, they die the same way. They should all be treated equally, and it's pathetic that, again, the House Republicans and their religious canter, which I got to say, this has got to have something religion. They're bringing their religion into government again, and it's pathetic that they do so. Go ahead, Alex.
So another story about our military men and women. An atheist airman must swear to God or leave the Air Force. An unnamed airman at Creech Air Force Base in Nevada was denied reenlistment in August after he refused to take an oath that ended with the phrase, "So help me God." He was given until November to change his mind and take the oath that reads, I, your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed me according to the regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Does the oath lose any of its meaning or impact if the airman doesn't say the final sentence?
Not a bit. Are you kidding me? This is pathetic. So in other words, an atheist can't serve in the U.S. military now? You know, this will be great, Alex, if they're forced to bring back the draft. Can you imagine if they bring back the draft and atheists can't serve? Can you imagine how many new atheists will be in the country? Everybody will turn atheist then to stay out of the draft. This is so ridiculous. This is utterly absurd. So in other words, they're saying that an atheist can't be trusted to protect the country unless he swears an oath to something that's imagined, something that's a belief, something that no one can prove. There is no one on the planet that can prove God exists. It's only a belief. But if you don't swear to that belief, you're not allowed to be. Well, I guess Jesse Ventura will have a dishonorable discharge now because Jesse Ventura doesn't swear to God. I didn't even do it in my court case that I just had. I simply said I affirm. I did not swear to God when I took an oath up at court, but it doesn't mean I'm going to lie. It doesn't mean I'm any different. People need to understand something. Atheists are real people with real values, the same as anybody else. They simply don't believe there's a supreme being, and nobody out there, nobody can prove there is. So until they can prove there is, why are atheists being discriminated against? Because they don't believe. Okay, that's like not believing in the tooth fairy. Are we going to make people swear to the tooth fairy before they can go serve in the military? Same thing. Swear allegiance that you believe in the tooth fairy, and swear allegiance that you believe in all this other stuff. I don't hold it against religious people, and they shouldn't hold it against me either. End of story. Continue on.
Well, now let's talk about the latest from the TSA, who are now swiping people's food. Bob Porter, a government affairs consultant, packed in his checked baggage a couple pounds of brisket and smoked sausage from a famous Kansas City barbecue, but when he arrived at home in Washington, D.C., the food was missing. Travelers are allowed to pack food in their checked luggage, including liquids such as sauces, soups, beers, and wine, but the TSA may have to unwrap the food for a closer look. And despite the TSA finding nothing out of the ordinary with Porter's bag or its screening, United claims they are not liable for the loss, damage to, or delay in delivery of such items. Can the screening process get any worse at the airport, Governor?
Well, all I know is that, let's get to this first. I think the famous Kansas City barbecue needs to jump on this. What a hell of an ad for them. Our barbecue will get stolen from you in your bag at the airport by the TSA people because it's so good. Not even the TSA can keep their hands off of our Kansas City barbecue. Please be aware of that. If you come to Kansas City and want to bring any home, remember, if you go through the airport, there's going to be TSA people with big smiles on their faces, and you're going to have to give them napkins after your bag goes through, because they're going to have to clean up after eating all your Kansas City barbecue. You know, it's kind of one of these where it's so laughable you want to cry. It kind of fits into that category, Alex. It's laughable, but you want to cry at the end. But, you know, it goes to show you, as I've stated, I went to court for all of you. Remember this. You go to any airport in the United States of America, you are not protected by the Constitution. You are not protected by the Bill of Rights. They can do anything they want to you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So good luck on getting your barbecue back. It ain't going to happen, because airports are not part of the United States. They do not fall under the Constitution and Bill of Rights, according to our judicial system.
Well, here's just a quick one from Mother Jones. The New York Times had to run the best correction ever last week, and I quote, Correction, September 9th, 2014. An earlier version of a summary with this article misstated the former title of Dick Cheney. He was vice president, not president. What do you think, Governor? Did the New York Times get Dick's title wrong, or did somebody finally get it right?
Oh, they got it right. I think Dick was the president for those 8 years. I think George Bush was the puppet. George Bush stood out there and pretended to be president, but Darth Vader was the real president for those 8 years, Dick Cheney. But I think anybody that studied anything of the Bush-Cheney administration knows Dick was the real guy in charge of most of it.
Well, this last story will serve as a perfect primer for your interview with Richard Gage. This is from an article written by Hunter S. Thompson, published on September 12, 2001. Just one day after the tragedy of 9/11, ESPN ran this column by Thompson, and I quote, "The towers are gone now, reduced to bloody rubble, along with all hopes for peace in our time, in the United States or any other country. Make no mistake about it, we are at war now with somebody, and we will stay at war with that mysterious enemy for the rest of our lives. It will be a religious war, a sort of Christian jihad, fueled by religious hatred and led by merciless fanatics on both sides. It will be a guerrilla warfare on a global scale, with no front lines and no identifiable enemy. We are going to punish someone for this attack, but just who or what will be blown to smithereens for it is hard to say. Maybe Afghanistan, maybe Pakistan or Iraq, or possibly all three at once. Who knows? This is going to be a very expensive war, and victory is not guaranteed for anyone, and certainly not for anyone as baffled as George W. Bush. All he knows is that his father started the war a long time ago, and that he, the goofy child president, has been chosen by fate and the global oil industry to finish it now. He will declare a national security emergency and clamp down hard on everybody, no matter where they live or why. If the guilty won't hold up their hands and confess, he and the generals will ferret them out by force." Seems like Hunter could see into our future, right, Governor?
I'll tell you what, I never read this until right now, but I've always been an admirer of Hunter S. Thompson. I was fortunate enough to spend an hour on the phone with him one time. I regret that I never made it out to Colorado and spent a few days with this man. He sent a message to me when I became governor of Minnesota, and it was the most simple message yet profound. You know what it was, Alex, from Hunter S. Thompson? He sent me a message through Warren Zevon, the great singer-songwriter who played at my inauguration, and the message was simple. He said, "Governor, never answer the phone after midnight." And he was right, because now that I was governor, anybody that calls the governor after midnight, it ain't going to be good news. It's going to be bad news. And so Hunter's idea was get a good night's sleep, deal with it in the morning, because there'll be nothing you can do with it anyway that night. Hunter S. Thompson was right on. He actually wrote this the day after September the 11th, September the 12th, 2001, and he is exactly correct. This entire writing, Hunter Thompson, I don't think he was a prophet, but I think we shouldn't call him Dr. Hunter Thompson anymore, which of course was a farce, and he did that as a joke. I think we should call him the prophet, Hunter S. Thompson, because this is the most right-on paragraphs I have ever read the day after 9/11. This is proof completely as to what went down and what happened and what will happen, and Hunter Thompson is completely correct on that. Hats off to Hunter S. Thompson. This should be printed. You know what? I want this printed on my blog. I want all you guys out that are in charge of Jesse Ventura's stuff. I want the Hunter S. Thompson quote put on all my stuff. Put it on my blog. Put it on everything. And state the date that it was written, and maybe it'll finally wake up people to know what truly happened on September 11th and what truly happening today. Hunter S. Thompson had it right on. Nothing could be said better than what Hunter wrote. That's it for this week's headlines. Now I'd like to take a moment, of course, to answer a few questions from you on We the People edition of Ask Jesse. All right, Alex, what do my vigilant viewers have in store for me today? Fire away.
Well, this first one is from Douglas Campbell in California. I'm not quite sure why we are all so excited to see the 28 redacted pages of the 9/11 Commission report when it was a corrupt and ridiculous sham in the first place. This stinks of, quote, establishment cover. And an actual investigation would be terrific, but where will we find anyone to do it that is not in the pockets of the banking establishment?
Well, Douglas is completely correct there, but you have to chip away at it, just like you chip away at the Warren Commission and the Kennedy assassination. Keep chipping away at 9/11. Anything we can learn, any redacted stuff we can learn, it gives us more knowledge to understand what took place that day. So he's wrong on that. The 28 redacted pages are important, but he is right when he said it was a corrupt and ridiculous sham to begin with in the first place. But let's see these 28 pages. Maybe they're not corrupt and ridiculous. Maybe those are the only authentic pages in the entire 9/11 report. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, some viewers had their own questions for the 9/11 Commission. About Face from Above Top Secret asks, why was NORAD told to stand down? Why conduct exercises parallel to the real thing and leave the country undefended?
To create confusion, to have a stand down so that 9/11 could be successful. It's the only answer I can come up with for you about Face. That's the only answer I can come up with. Move on.
Annabellum at Above Top Secret asked this, why did the commission not mention Building 7? It was part of the crime scene, right?
Yes, isn't that amazing that was left out of the entire report, not one word. And I'll tell you what else. I actually run into people today, and it's what, 13 years after the event or more, who still don't know about Building 7. They still have no idea that a third building fell to the ground. So they were successful because they didn't print about Building 7. Half the American public doesn't even know that because they never bother to educate themselves. They simply take what George Bush or Dick Cheney says and run with it from there with no questions asked. And I shouldn't just say it about George Bush and Dick Cheney. They take whatever the government says and never question the government. After all, if you question the government, aren't you unpatriotic? Up next.
Yeah, up next, Duke Decker from California writes, the first thing that made me raise an eyebrow on September 11th was how quickly cleanup crews arrived at the crash scenes. Could they have been so well organized that quickly after events?
Well, you'd like to think we would be. You'd like to think that we have emergency response teams that can respond quickly and effectively after a tragic event like that. So, I don't so much question that. I think that there are American people who are great patriotic Americans on standby ready to do those horrible jobs. Plus tons of volunteers came out. They were moved. They were moved because of their patriotism. So I don't think necessarily that raises an eyebrow so much with me, but it's a good thought. It's something to look into, certainly. Let's go ahead.
From Gary Carter in Oregon, how you can inform more Americans about what all Americans can do to force Congress to have an independent investigation of 9/11. What can we do to make this happen?
Be vigilant. I say it every show. Be vigilant. Pay attention. Call your congressman. Write letters. It's your job as a citizen to do so. That's what Jefferson, Washington, and Adams told us we had to do for the republic to survive. Be vigilant. Be bothersome. Trust me, it works. I was in elected office.
Valerie from Colorado wrote in with, I just recently heard about our military's use of depleted uranium weapons in Iraq and in the Gulf Wars. Is this true? Isn't it illegal? Why would our military do such a terrible thing? Not only does that hurt innocent civilians and destroy the environment, but it harms our own troops. What's going on?
Valerie, it's called war. All is fair in love and war. You've heard that statement. Let me take you even farther than that, Valerie. What is napalm? We've been using napalm since the beginning of Vietnam or before. That's a chemical weapon. The United States has used chemical and biological weapons many times. The only thing we get upset over is if somebody else is going to use them. It's okay if we do as I do, not as I say. Always remember that. But I'm glad you're educating yourself, but it's been going on a lot longer than simply using uranium weapons in Iraq. Napalm is a chemical weapon. We use that. Unbelievable. What about Agent Orange? There's another chemical weapon used in Vietnam. Thousands of veterans dying from being exposed to it, and nobody cares because in war, as I said, all is fair in love and war.
From Eric Janis in Oklahoma, thank you for your prior service and your contribution with Off the Grid. I'm a prior veteran and follower of your thoughts and ideas. I'm a patriot and brought into the idea that I was contributing and sending bad guys to a much-needed judgment. My question is, does the Patriot Act or similar laws justify the use of wartime applications on the American people?
Not at all. And in fact, I would tell Eric this. The Patriot Act should be called the Treason Act, because he was in the military and he took an oath, as I did, to defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The Patriot Act is a direct assault on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It should be called the Treason Act, not the Patriot Act.
Douglas Duke in Alabama, do you think Obama is trying to take this country into communism?
No.
As simple as that?
Yeah. He's doing nothing different than George Bush did right before him. You know, nobody's taking anybody into communism. You need to remember, you got capitalism, you got communism. Neither work by themselves, it's been proven. You need a combination, and not just communism, socialism. You need a combination, a little bit of both to be successful, because neither can stand on their own. History's proven it.
Bill Denton from Tennessee had this to say. Hello, Gov. My question is based on health care. I am a 51-year-old man with cerebral palsy. All my life I have worked, and now that my body has finally gotten to the point that I can't, I had to surrender and ask for disability. It took me 9 months for them to decide I was really handicapped. Now I am told that I have to wait another year and a half before I get Medicare. My wife works, so I can't get Medicaid. I know for a fact that, of course, Congress gets universal health care. The military, they deserve it also, and prisoners. My wife is a nurse at a maximum security prison, and all their health care is given to them for little or nothing. All health care, surgeries, tests, medications, yet I pay thousands for basic treatment just so I can get by. So, Gov, how and when do you think the middle and lower class will get the same benefits as the rest of the prisoners?
I don't know. And Bill, maybe what you need to do, you got cerebral palsy. I'm sure marijuana could help you feel better. You're from Tennessee. Smoke a joint in front of the authorities. They'll arrest you and send you to jail, and you can get all the health care you need while you're in there. But please, I'm doing that a little tongue-in-cheek, Bill. Don't take me literally when I say that to you. It's a crime. You suffer from cerebral palsy, and yet it requires them a year and a half to figure it out. Welcome to government bureaucracy. Welcome to this huge government entity that's been created here. It's a sad story. Bill, don't break the law. Don't go to jail. But as you stated, it might be one way for you to get health care.
Here's the last one from Justin Cross in Halifax, Canada. Do you think Obamacare will make a huge impact in the U.S.?
It already is making a huge impact in the U.S. There's far more people with health insurance now than had it before. And the more people in an industrialized country like ours, I've said it 1,000 times, in a country like the United States, anyone who is sick should have the ability to go see a doctor. Plain and simple. Now, how you arrive at that, that's the big 800-pound gorilla. But anyone should, if you're sick, should be able to see a doctor. Okay. I'll say this, thanks for your questions and comments. Keep sending them to Aura TV, and maybe I'll answer your question on the air on We the People or Off the Grid. Now it's time for this week's guest, Richard Gage. My guest was an architect for 20 years and a member of the American Institute of Architects. In 2006, he founded Architects and Engineered for 9/11 Truth. There's that word again, truth. A nonprofit, nonpartisan organization of architects, engineers, and affiliates dedicated to exposing the falsehoods and the revealing facts about the complete destruction of all 3 World Trade Center high-rises. Please welcome to this podcast Richard Gage to We the People podcast with Jesse Ventura. Richard, great to have you on today.
Thanks, Jesse. It's an honor to be on with you.
Richard, let's go right to the beginning, and let me ask you the most simple question. When did you first start doubting 9/11 or the official 9/11 report?
In March of 2006, I was faced with a radio interview in which David Ray Griffin was laying out the evidence that we had not seen on the mainstream media. And I was just shocked. I'm saying, this can't even be true. We would have heard about this. Surely the mainstream media would have picked this up and told us about it. Well, surely 2,000 architects and engineers already know about World Trade Center 7 and are calling for a new investigation. But back then, Jesse, not true. I was virtually alone out there speaking after I heard about this evidence about this third tower, that most architects and engineers know nothing about the third worst structural failure in modern history. It was astounding to me.
Where I started to question it was when Bush announced we were going to invade Iraq. Because I sat there and thought, wait a minute, if this is revenge or a response to 9/11, there wasn't one Iraqi involved. Why would we invade Iraq? You know, most of the alleged 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabians, and Iraq had nothing to do with it. And so that was when my antenna went up and thought, wait a minute, is there a bigger picture here? Is this something more? Because I, like everyone, I was governor when 9/11 happened, and I went on automatic defense mode, I'll admit that, and my main focus was protecting the state of Minnesota, and I didn't get off, thinking about anything else until I actually left office.
Yeah, everything that happened after 9/11, in the aftermath of 9/11, including, of course, the invasion of Iraq, the legislating away of our civil liberties, the $4.5 trillion war on terror, it all betrays what they tell us happened on 9/11. And it's pretty amazing that with the evidence for Building 7, for instance, we have, it just lays it out. I mean, this building came down at free fall acceleration, faster than a bowling ball falling off the side of the building. That means that all 82 columns had to have been cut, all at once virtually, in order to allow this building to fall in the exact manner of a classic controlled demolition, smoothly, symmetrically, suddenly, straight down. It's incredible. And they say due to normal office fires. No. Office fires have never brought down a skyscraper ever in the history of skyscrapers. So when we show architects and engineers this, Jesse, they just drop their jaw. Then they're ready to talk about the evidence for the Twin Towers.
Well, it's interesting because when I was doing conspiracy theory, and they wouldn't let us talk to her, but there was a BBC reporter who actually was standing out in front of Building 7. I don't know if you've seen this. I'm sure you probably have.
Oh, yeah.
She was standing out in front of Building 7, and she gives like a 7-minute report that this third building has collapsed, and it collapsed in 7 seconds, 49 stories, wasn't hit by an airplane. And the whole time she's doing it, it's so amazing. The building's right behind her, and on the videotape it says 4:50 in the afternoon. And of course, Building 7 didn't go down till 5:20, I believe. So 30 minutes ahead of time, she's broadcasting back to the BBC that this third building has gone to the ground. When we went to the BBC with my TV show and wanted to interview her, we were totally blocked. They wouldn't let us talk to her or anything of that nature. Now, why? Why can't we talk to this woman?
Yeah, and they even announced the reason for the building's collapse. They say due to structural weakening because of the fires. Well, even better than that is CNN. They announced the collapse of a 50-story building just after the Twin Towers had come down. And they announced it. This is 7 hours early. Well, some people suggest that it was supposed to come down at that time, because had it would have been completely obscured in the massive dust cloud created by the Twin Towers when they went down.
So now, as architects and engineers, what conclusions have you drawn on how these buildings came down, your professional conclusion?
Well, the evidence, if we look at Building 7 first, the official reports early on actually tell us exactly what happened. FEMA documents in Appendix C in 2002 in their report that we have a hot sulfur corrosion attack on the steel, that the steel has been invaded by molten iron, that the The author, Jonathan Barnett, a fire protection engineer, cites that the ends of the steel beams appear to have been partially evaporated. This takes extraordinary hot temperatures. We're talking 2,800 degrees minimum to melt iron. And there's iron droplets in all the World Trade Center dust. It's incredible. These are the size of a human hair, and they comprise up to 6% of the World Trade Center dust. So we have extraordinary hot temperatures, completely unaccountable by the official story with office fire and jet fuel. Of course, there's no jet plane that hit Building 7. So what happened to these buildings is obvious. We have thermite incendiaries, evidence of it throughout the World Trade Center complex in molten iron pools seen by first responders. The structural engineer, Leslie Robertson himself, sees a little river of steel. There's molten iron pouring out of the South Tower 10 minutes prior to its collapse. There's documented across the site by infrared satellite imagery temperatures exceeding 2,800 degrees by Bechtel and the MTI. It's absolutely overwhelming what's going on here. I mean, there's no question. The buildings behave as in the exact manner of a classic controlled demolition. Building 7 certainly, and a very explosive demolition in the case of the Twin Towers. I mean, just with the evidence of freely flying, laterally ejected structural steel sections weighing 4 tons, ejected laterally at 70 miles an hour, landing 600 feet away, is evidence of high-energy explosives in and of itself. Because remember, gravity works down. I know you like to simplify things for the people in denial out there. Gravity works down, not out, and yet there's no pile of 110 floors underneath each of these towers. There's no pile of 90,000 tons of concrete and 220 acres of fluted metal decking which supported that concrete. It's all been pulverized to a fine powder and laid throughout lower Manhattan like a 4-inch blanket from river to river.
Richard, let me ask a question. Let me throw something in here. Now, if it was controlled demolition, obviously, that blew up the towers like that, when did they do it? When did they get in and wire it? How would that have happened?
Yeah, important question. Well, if they could have gotten to the core columns and beams in the World Trade Center towers, they could have set these explosives without anybody knowing. The elevator shafts are right adjacent to the core columns and beams. In fact, there was an elevator modernization going on the 9 months prior to 9/11. Ace Elevator had this contract. It could have given a group of operatives months to set and place these charges without any of the tenants knowing. Of course, the security company would have to know. And so we certainly want an investigation of not only Ace Elevator, but the security company, which is Securicom or Stratosec, which has some interesting characters on its board of directors, and was also responsible for the security at the 2 airports where these flights took off from. So there's plenty of room for investigation here, as well as the company that creates nanothermite, which is found by an independent team of scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen. In all the World Trade Center dust samples, the independently collected samples, 4 of them, all show the same curious red-gray chips of nanothermite. And we're talking particles of iron oxide and aluminum powder that are 1,000 times smaller than the human hair. And these particles comprise up to tons, up to 10 tons of, by extrapolation from how much they found in the actual dust samples. This is very well documented in a 25-page peer-reviewed paper that has stood the test of time without challenge in the peer-reviewed literature. I mean, you know, the way to challenge somebody's conspiracy theory is to put up a peer-reviewed paper of your own. But this is very clear evidence that somebody is involved here, because this stuff is made only in the most sophisticated defense contracting laboratories. This is not made in a cave in Afghanistan.
Now, your organization is sponsoring a massive billboard in Times Square that shows footage of World Trade Center 7 collapsing. How has the response been to this out in New York City?
Everybody getting on to the Lincoln Tunnel to get out of Manhattan has to drive by this massive 89-foot wide, 40-foot tall digital video billboard. And yes, it shows Building 7 coming down because we can't get this on the mainstream media. So we take it directly to the people. We raised $25,000 for this digital billboard. I mean, it's extraordinary. Yes, the people see that coming down. We say, did you know a third tower fell on 9/11? No, I didn't know. What are you talking? People are open-minded. They don't have all the baggage.
Richard, isn't it amazing that here we are, what now, 12, 13 years after the event, and there are still people who do not know that Building 7, a third tower, went down. I find that just astounding.
They're building professionals.
You know?
Yeah, building professionals all over the world. They have no clue. And yeah, once they see it, they're open-minded.
Yeah, I find it astounding, though, that most of the general public has no idea. You'll say to them, well, are you aware that a third building went down later that afternoon and it was never struck by a plane? And they'll look at you like, no, I've never heard of that before. And I think to myself, what is wrong with these people out here? Do they not pay attention enough when an event of that size occurs that changes our entire lives in America, and the American people won't even take the time to study it and look at it just a little bit?
Yeah, as well as the evidence supporting the controlled demolition, because there are explosions heard in the case of Building 7. Kevin McFadden, for instance, Air Force medic, who was moved back 6 blocks away from the building because they're waiting for it to come down. They've been told it has structural damage, it's going to come down. Well, no building has ever come down due to fires, and structural damage isn't even a cause at all, a significant cause, according to the official story. So explosions are heard by several witnesses. Then it comes down in 7 seconds, straight down. It was the most beautiful job.
And here's what I'd like to know today. Now, if they're telling us the truth that this building came down because of fire, how come there are no warnings on all the rest of the skyscrapers in America telling people that if the building catches on fire, you must exit quickly because it could collapse?
There have been no structural changes made to the International Building Code or other codes as a result of 9/11. That is, you hit it on the head. You would think that they would have had a massive review of all the existing skyscrapers, thousands out there. And no, it wasn't done. Our skyscrapers are fine, says the International Conference of Building Officials. There's just a few changes in the fireproofing and the exiting, but not structurally. Nothing that would keep a building from falling at free fall acceleration due to thermal expansion, the magical initiation of collapse that NIST has come up with their multi-million-dollar computer animation, which disproves their own theory because the building begins to fall over and they stop the animation within 2 seconds before people can see what's really happening. It looks nothing like the actual video. They can't even get that animation to look like the video.
You know, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, but even I know jet fuel is mostly kerosene. Kerosene doesn't burn that hot. I'm correct in that, right?
Right. Kerosene doesn't burn any hotter than desks or chairs. It's a normal hydrocarbon. So even the official story.
I remember as a little kid going up to my lake cabin with my parents before they had electricity, and we used to burn the old kerosene lamps. I remember those, the old kerosene lamps. Now, it's not a hot burning substance. How can the American people for 1 second accept that jet fuel and furniture and carpet burning could get to the intense heat level to cause steel encased in concrete to uniformly collapse? I mean, that's so astounding to me now. I sit and think, how do people accept this? It's because they don't want to know the truth, do they, Richard? They really don't want to know, do they?
No, we were placed in a state of shock that day, Jesse, and we wanted answers. We wanted fast answers. We were under attack for the first time since Pearl Harbor. We were regressed in cognitive dissonance to a state of infantile psychological state dependent upon our parent figure, our government, to tell us what the hell is going on. We accept that, and afterward, we don't want to go back and visit that painful day. It's very hard for people to even be willing to go and look at this evidence, and that's one of the reasons why we don't have people aware even of the third worst structural failure in modern history. In addition to the media censorship, which has only aired the collapse or destruction of this building three times in the history of this building, in the history since the 9/11. So there's a lot of reasons why people are slow in picking up the truth about 9/11. Once they see Building 7 and they go to the Twin Towers, they're inevitably led to the realization this was some sort of an inside job, and that is also indigestible to the American people, to most of us.
You know what I always love to hear, and I hear this often when I'm trying to educate people to pay attention to it. They always say this standard line. They go, well, if there'd have been a conspiracy, somebody would have talked. Have you heard that one, Richard? If there was a conspiracy of this magnitude, someone would have talked. And I always counter that and go, really? Like, who's going to admit they took part in the mass murder of 3,000 people? Somebody going to come forward and just admit they participated in that? And the other thing I try to remind people always is how compartmentalized it is. I mean, I use as an example the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project, over 100,000 people worked on that project, and not a word was spilled until that bomb hit in Japan. And then kaboom, all of a sudden the world knew that we had this device that could cause this destruction to the whole planet. But yet nobody leaked that information prior to that bomb landing, did they?
No. That's the compartmentalization is another great reason. And also, how do we know that nobody came forward? I mean, we've been coming forward since 2006 with 2,200 architects and engineers presented to every possible media outlet and every government elected representative of our federal and state governments with the DVD, with the petition when we reached 1,000 and again when we reached 2,000, and virtually no response, very little response.
By the way, Richard, I got to tell you, you got me banned from the Huffington Post.
I remember that.
Yeah,
you guys proud did. Of that moment.
No, you guys did, because Huffington Post had been on my case for years to write for them. So I finally broke down, and I did. And I wrote about your convention in San Francisco, how all these architects and engineers, thousands of them, got together at this convention and voted overwhelmingly, demanding a new investigation. The Huffington Post posted it and then pulled it within hours, and the response I got was, well, we don't do conspiracy theories. And I countered and I said, wait a minute, this was not a conspiracy theory. This was an event that took place in San Francisco that mainstream media chose not to cover. These thousands of architects of engineers who met to go officially stating that they want a new investigation because they don't believe the results of the one we got. This is not a conspiracy theory, but that's what I got from the Huffington Post, and I have not done a thing with them since. So I just want you to know, although there's no hard feelings on my part, I could care less, but I want you to know your group got me fired from corresponding on the Huffington Post. Because that's a feather. Well, because I merely told that you guys met in San Francisco and what the essence of your meeting was about.
Yeah, that's a feather in your cap for sure. Because we have also been not only on the right, but also the left end of the political spectrum, with these progressive radio stations such as Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman, all of the journalists who tout the who fight, war. They're anti-war activists in one sense, and they go after the oil as a reason for war, but they don't go after the actual cause of this, which is much deeper.
Well, the catalyst, the lighter, the spark. 9/11 was the spark that sent us to war. That was the catalyst, the same as Pearl Harbor back in World War II, the same as the Gulf of Tonkin incident in Vietnam, the list goes, the Ruckstag fire in Germany, the list goes on and on and on of all these false flag operations. And I pull my hair out trying to tell people, don't you see it's the same thing over and over again? If they get something that works, they're going to use it again. And clearly these false flag operations, they get you into war because people lose their clear sense of thinking. They take knee-jerk reactions, and the quest for revenge becomes so powerful. Am I correct on that, Richard?
Yeah, I guess so. It's got to be something that is not being reported. Well, Project Censored in Sonoma State did a report on who owns this media that is not reporting all of these. This is the crime of the century, 9/11. Why isn't it being reported? Well, 90% of the mainstream media on the left and the right, both, is owned by just 6 corporations. And they say, well, who owns and runs these corporations? Well, it turns out to be the same people who own and run the corporations in the arms industry, the oil industry, the banking industry. This is incredible. All of whom profited enormously from 9/11.
Without a doubt. Now let's go to something. How do you feel about other theories like Dr. Judy Wood and what she talks about of a free energy type weapon was used that day?
Well, what we see is that the evidence that is available supports, 100% supports the theory of explosive controlled demolition with incendiaries. What we don't see is the evidence supporting a directed energy weapon. Judy, for instance, says...
Let me ask this, though. How do you explain the burnt cars as far away as the FDR and cars flipped over on their hoods and all that? I mean, surely the explosions of the World Trade Center couldn't cause cars 6 blocks away to be toasted and burned, could they?
Well, what we do know is that there's falling liquid molten iron out of the towers that lands in all the World Trade Center dust. So that's certainly responsible for toasting the car.
Well, no, it isn't. No, it is not. Wait a minute, Richard. I got to fight with you on this one. It is not, because I've seen the photographs of the toasted cars and flipped over cars. Right next to them are trees in full foliage. Their leaves are on. If all this stuff was so hot could burn a car, wouldn't it have burnt the leaves off the trees?
Well, I imagine it would. We're talking about droplets.
But it didn't.
The diameter.
But
the diameter of a human hair.
Let me state this to you, and please hear me out. We all can agree the official story's bullshit. We all, I think, can agree on that, and that's what we should focus on now. As I've told people, what actually did it? Well, we're not going to know that until we find out who the perpetrators are, because only the perpetrators know for sure what was used. And I feel that way about it. But we still all of us are on the same road seeking the truth because we haven't gotten the truth. My belief is I don't discount any theory because I think all theories bear some weight in this. The only theory I do discount is the official government one.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that, but we still need to be looking at the evidence. I mean, the evidence shows nanothermite. The evidence shows explosions, hundreds of first responders seeing, hearing, experiencing explosions. The evidence shows molten iron microspheres and molten iron underneath all 3 towers, exceeding temperatures of 2,800 degrees.
And a free energy type weapon couldn't bring about those same things?
Well, according to Judy Wood herself, all of those things are denied in pages 120 to 126 in her voluminous book. So she's denying the basic evidence for which we have scientific forensic support, overwhelming support. But denying explosions, denying nanothermite, denying regular thermite, denying the evidence of extreme hot temperatures documented by innumerable officials exceeding 2,800 degrees is not gaining credibility in my book for the search of truth. And also suggesting that the steel was dustified. The steel was laid out in a 1,400-foot diameter. It's all over the place. And there are no partially dustified steel beams, and there's no steel dust in the World Trade Center dust. This is elemental iron, not steel.
I don't know. When I snuck into the places I went to, and I walked the grounds of 9/11, there was a lot of things missing that day, and nobody can ever account. They said they shipped out all this stuff. I'd like to see the bill of lading. I'd like to see witnesses that saw it get shipped out allegedly to China. I don't think nothing was shipped out. I think it all was disintegrated that day. There was nothing left to ship out to other places.
There are photographs of barge after barge leaving that place, and looking at the aerial photos, there's steel beams, interior and exterior, all well beyond the ground zero boundaries, just layered upon layer of steel across the site of the World Trade Center.
Well, I didn't see it when I was there, and I was there a couple weeks after.
Oh, I'll send you an aerial photograph, high res. It's incredible. Right. You'll be blown away.
I'll need to see that then, because I do give Judy some credibility on this, because I've read her book, and it makes some sense to me. And remember too, I do know a little bit about explosives, being a member of the underwater demolition team, so I know how to blow things up. And
well, then you should. You'll have seen the crater in Building 6, which she says was cut with a cookie cutter like a circle. But you tell me, looking in there and seeing that the elevator shaft itself, was it blown up in a series of explosions, which is what we believe, and with all the steel laying in the center of this hole. But she says it was somehow melted or dustified in one big round cookie cutter, like indicating to her a space-based weapon of some sort. Well, if that were the case, you couldn't bring the towers down uniformly at free fall, starting at, in the case of the North Tower, about 15 stories down, and then at a rate of almost free fall, dropping these towers symmetrically. That would be almost impossible. It would be impossible.
Maybe so, but
directed energy weapon.
Do you know what's always in the back of my mind, Richard?
What's that?
Star Wars. You know, back in the mid-'80s, Ronald Reagan's pet thing was to create some type of defense system that would annihilate any missile sent towards the United States. We spent billions of dollars on it, and nobody ever knows, were we successful or not? Nobody's ever told us we were, but I've spoken to a few scientists that say, yes, we were, that they allegedly worked on it. I did it during my conspiracy theory show. And they said, yes, we were successful in creating Star Wars. So if we haven't seen what this this missile defense Star Wars can do, then how can we possibly throw any scenario out if we indeed do have it? And I think that we do.
Yeah, well, if it's fun to imagine the possibilities of a technology that we know nothing about, but the evidence, we don't even know what the evidence would be to support such a technology. And the evidence that we do have fits the bill for thermite and nanothermite exactly point by point.
I still don't buy the burnt cars. You haven't convinced me on that one. I don't see how they could be toasted as far away as the FDR, only the metal, not the upholstery, not the rubber, none of that. See, I like to put it into the equation of something happened that day that was and remember this, everything that's hot glows, but not everything that glows is hot. And also remember.
Well, name one thing that. Name one thing that glows that is not hot.
Well, I'm not a physicist, but I know there is. And also, always remember the microwave oven, the molecular of it. How you can take a piece of paper or paper plate and put a piece of chicken on it, and you can burn that chicken black, and yet the paper plate stays untouched. Here's my question: if it was so hot, Richard, these temperatures of nanothermite that you're talking about, how come all that paper was flying all over Manhattan and didn't burn? Cars were burnt and yet paper survived. I need an answer to that question.
I think there's several tons of paper that probably did burn, along with those
all
cars.
of it should have burned, Richard. How could you have temperatures that would destroy the 3,000? There were over 3,000 steel file cabinets. The file cabinets are destroyed and the paper survives, and the papers are blowing. I remember that day. There were paper blowing all over Manhattan. If those temperatures were so intense that they could melt steel and burn and destroy what they did, how could a shred of paper survive? Last time I checked, paper burns pretty quick.
Yeah, we had massive explosions, probably high-energy explosions, very locally, pulverized 90,000 tons of concrete into powder, which takes an explosive force with gaseous pressure, like high-energy explosives.
Right, but how does paper survive?
Well, the paper's set in every direction with the massive explosions.
Come on, the paper'd be destroyed.
File cabinet.
I've never said it.
So.
Wait a minute, Richard. I've never said a demolition charge where paper survived. Never seen one. I've never seen one where paper survives. Paper burns quick. See, I need an explanation for if all this heat was so intense by nanothermite and all these explosions, how could the paper survive when the steel and the concrete couldn't?
Okay, but Bechtel...
It's a good question anyway.
And MTI and the satellite... Wait, and the satellite infrared shows 2,800 degree temperatures on the ground and under the buildings, in the case of the Twin Towers, for months. So they document very carefully these extreme hot temperatures. Okay, so there's no question that this is hot enough to melt concrete even. There's chunks of melted concrete. It takes 3,000 degrees to melt concrete. There's no question about the temperatures. They say flowing like lava, this hot molten material that was burning underwater.
Then,
thermite
Richard,
has its own source of oxygen.
Let me play devil's advocate then. How could any of them firemen have survived? And many of them did. The firemen that went in the building, because I spoke with some that were underneath rubble. The building collapsed allegedly right on top of them, and yet they still survived through all the heat you're talking about. How could human flesh possibly survive that if all these other things could not?
Yeah, the heat coalesces in pools and flows according to gravity. I mean, these guys are not bathing in it, or they did. I mean, look how many didn't survive. We're talking about over 3,000 people. You know that.
But there were a lot that did. But Richard, there were a lot that did survive because I spoke to them. I went out and met some of the firemen that came out from the rubble. You know, through this whole thing, and I like I said, I'll play devil's advocate with you because my mind is open to any solution to this other than the official one. I do not buy the official one, and that's where you and we may differ a little bit and fight back and forth a little bit on opinions, but we both have the same ultimate goal, and that is the truth, and we're not getting it. I'm correct in saying that, right?
Absolutely, and we've got to have a real investigation. I mean, we're raising so many questions here today about what really happened, and that all of which pull the rug out from underneath the official story. So, yes, we've got to be united.
Richard, let's finish off quick here now. What are your plans, architects and engineers, for 9/11 Truth? What are your plans for the 14th, the 15th, and the 20th reunion? Are you going to keep the feet to the fire as long as it takes?
Oh, whatever it takes, Jesse. I'm not going to live in a police state. I'd rather die speaking the truth here, and I will continue to speak, and we will continue gathering thousands more architects and engineers, speaking to elected representatives, going to New York every year, as we are this year, where we're going to have the premiere of Anatomy of a Great Deception on September 11th at Theater 80 at 2 o'clock. In the East Village. We're going to have street actions downtown. We are on the street with our signs, with our banners, handing out leaflets, including the alternative guide to the 9/11 Museum. What you will not see in the museum. It looks exactly like the official brochure. And we are showing people, hey, these towers were blown up. There's a lateral force sending 4-ton perimeter walls, structural section 60 miles an hour, landing 600 feet in every direction. There's a third tower that went down. So they've got to know this.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, keep up the good work. This is from me to you. Stay vigilant. Keep doing this, because it's people like you and hopefully people like me. Eventually we will get the truth, and that's what we want. So I want to thank my guest, Richard Gage, for joining me today on We the People with Jesse Ventura. Go to his site, people, ae911truth.org. Let me repeat that, AE Architects and Engineers, 911truth.org, for more information about the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. Visit our website, aura.tv/offthegrid, for more of our Uncover 9/11 coverage. And as always, people, stay vigilant. Don't put your head in a hole. Pay attention. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Jesse. Awesome interview.
All right.
Love the conversation.
Very good. We'll do it again sometime, and keep up the good work.
Got it, my man. You too.
This is Corolla Digital.